Hey guys, it's Damien here, and I've had plenty of people that were asking me how I go about my settings printing out this airframe. So I'm going to take you guys over to the computer and we'll put it on a slicer and I'll show you all the support settings and my printer settings to be able to print out this one piece airframe. Alright, hey guys, so I have Prusa Slicer set up for my slicer, and I already have my file for the latest Goose Sky airframe downloaded and exported into here. Now, this airframe is available on Thingiverse and Printables, so let's get started. The first thing I usually do is I stand this airframe upright, so I do print it standing up like this, and when I do print this airframe I do use organic supports because that's the type of support that I get the most success in. And most of the time you could definitely use auto generated supports, so if you go into print settings under support material you could click this and hit slice, and then you would be all set. But there's certain areas where the supports aren't really necessary, so you could either red mark them to remove the areas, or you could just coat them yourself, which I end up using. So let's get started. I will undo the auto generated support, and then you want to hit this, and then this is where you want to make sure you hit your model. There's this paintbrush, and here is the brush size. If the surfaces are larger, I tend to use a larger brush. So let's start from the back here. Usually get this, let's maybe make this a little bigger. So I tend to brush the bottom side of the tail boom block as best as you can. You don't have to do it absolutely perfect, just as long as it has a rough idea on where you are brushing this. These angles should be fine as far as the upper frame supports, but I add them in anyways just in case on both ends. Now, sometimes I do have the edges of the inner part of my tail boom block sag here on the edge. I don't know why. Sometimes it doesn't, but we'll zoom in here and I'll make this a little smaller, and I just get it around this area, right, just like that. And I do that for both sides. So let's move. Oh, it's actually, there we go. Quite zoomed in, but yeah, just a little bit of support. And then for some reason the edges on the tail boom block tend to sag sometimes, and then the rest of it actually is quite straight. So I don't know why that happens, but from my printing experience, sometimes the edges don't start off the best. So that's what I end up doing as far as the back side here. Now to move along, I definitely put some supports on the edges alongside here, and sometimes if you go past the edges that's fine, but then it tends to print a lot more support outside this area. And I do not put any support in these counter bores here. They will sag a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal. You just have a screw going through there. You can add supports if you want to, but it doesn't affect me too much. So let's do the other side here. Oh, caught an edge a little bit. And if you don't like the way this turned out, I sometimes hit Control Z, and then you could just start over. And I actually didn't like that either. So I just, Control Z, and then you could do it all over again. Now, I do tend to get this area, so let's just increase the brush size just a tad bit. right underneath the anti-rotation bracket as best as you can. And then let's rotate this. There we go. It doesn't have to be perfect. But, so there was one point where if you go back in the video, it actually had some supports here that is actually not as needed. I've actually had this area on the top portion of the anti-rotation bracket print out just fine. So if you want to add support there, that's perfectly fine. Not something I usually add. So that covers majority of the backside. So let's just go on to the bottom side of the motor mount. And I tend to just get something slightly bigger. I just fill everything because this entire area is a complete overhang and I just don't even want to risk any issues. You definitely want a nice strong motor mount. So I definitely get in the areas of where the counter bores are for the holes, and then if you get some overlapping here, it actually won't affect your organic supports. It won't try to go up and over. So that's perfectly fine. Now let's go to the arms here. And later on, I'll show you exactly what I mean when it comes to overlapping like the motor mount, but in these areas, it'll just start branching off because it doesn't know what else you need to support. But anyway, so sometimes I'll just do one small strip just like that. Oh, maybe you'll see it this time because I have some on the edges here. And just a tad bit, I do tend to get a little bit past if need be, just so that it doesn't droop when it prints. Alright, so we'll brush this side. And once again, I do not add any supports in the counter bores on either side. So that is it for this area. And then the last section I tend to put on supports, which is kind of hard to see. But I do add, let's just increase the brush size here. The bottom side of the battery tray. And then after that, get a nice path here. And then you want the upper part of the battery tray, which is also the flight controller tray, all mixed into one. So as long as you have the general area, it's not like if you miss small spots, it will just not support it. Let's see, how did I do this? I actually just, here's going through the battery tray onto the ceiling. You just kind of try to angle it as best as you can. If you need to zoom in, that's fine as well. Just like that. And then you could tell I have some here, but that won't be a problem. So that's mostly it. I don't tend to support the full length of the boom block just because it could be hard to take out, but from what it looks like, that's mostly it. So let's slice this up and let's see what it ends up looking like. Perfect. So you have some support here on the slanted areas of where your front your top part of your frame, and then you have the boom block, you have your anti-rotation bracket. So it looks like everything was done very cleanly. Sometimes I do end up getting both the organic supports coming from the inside here, which I don't know why. It's probably because I ended up with a little bit of, if you look here, probably these edges kind of forced the organic support to come out here, but it did just fine. Then you have the entire motor mount here, and then you have the entirety of the interior part of where the battery sits. So that is so you get about a 6-hour print, 57 grams, but this is at 20%. I usually print this around 50%. Let's see what happens. That'll probably definitely increase your weight, but if you want an extremely robust airframe, probably would be better to just hit all the way to 100. It's just asking, make sure, hey, can I use this type of pattern? Slice. It'll definitely be a heavier airframe, but this, yeah, 71 grams. But if you look here, about 11.29 of those grams, 11, 12, about 12 and a half grams, roughly a little over more than 12 and a half grams, you can deduct from this because that's mostly all support material. But yeah, so, and you could slide this down and see how this prints. Majority of your support is, majority of your infill is in these bigger areas here. But I tried to, you could tell I have 3 layer lines for the wall. If you want to stiffen up the wall even more, you can definitely use 4 layer lines of wall thickness. But just so you guys have an idea of what this looks like, let's get a better angle here. So there's pretty much no infill on the bottom walls or the bottom frames. Then you have some support here. You know what, let's just move to 20% just so you have a rough idea of what it looks like. Zoom out. Alright. So you got a little bit of infill here. The red is, I believe, top purple internal infill. So if you want to know what the infills are, these are the colors. So you could see the layer lines here. That's most of your infill, and then you have the thicker the walls, the more infill you'll end up needing to have, because I believe 3 layer lines. 3 layer lines there, and then this thicker part of the airframe, where that's where the transition between the bottom and top take place. Moving up, you got some infill on the top there, then you have the majority of your infill in the tail boom block. Keep moving up, the flight controller tray, some in the overhang arms here. It's developing those holes, and then you get all the way to the top. So that's how I would print my airframe, if anybody was curious. Now let's just quickly go through the settings that I have. I'm not sure if this will help you too much, but you might as well go through it anyway. So for the Prusa slicer, let's start with the top layers and perimeters. So I'm not going to go through all these settings, but if you want to pause the video and look and maybe screenshot some of these points, you're more than welcome to. So here are layer line heights. Like I said, this is where you would increase the wall thickness of your airframe if you need it. Vertical and horizontal shells. First layers, usually you want the first layer to be thick, but I try to keep it consistent. No reason, but this is your infill, your skirt and brim. I don't usually use it. You can, but I tend to. I don't know what it says, outer brim only, but you could tell here there is no brim. Support material, and like I said, this is where you would get the auto-generated supports if you don't want to do the brush the manual brushing along the airframe. So you just click that, and then you could just go back, slice. It'll take a couple seconds, and then yeah, see, it even starts to print some organic supports where these screws are, and sometimes it could be very nasty to pull these things out, but that definitely increases the amount of print time, which is fine. If this is what you're comfortable with and you don't want to keep manually setting it up, that's the way to do it. Speed. So as far as my speed goes, I do tend to decrease the speed for my organic supports because I've actually had them fail multiple times. So these are my print settings as far as speed goes. Multiple extruders, don't really have any multiple extruders. Advanced, your slicing, your flow, extrusion width, output options. Yeah, these are some settings I don't really mess with. So let's go to filament settings. I have my nozzle at 245 with the layers consistently at 80 degrees Celsius. Cooling, I just keep it all at 100. Advanced, pet G, I don't believe I really changed these settings too much. No, it's dependencies. Alright, printer settings, general. Custom G code, if you guys want to use this G code and you have a sidewind directs to these, this G code works great. Alright, machine limits, extruder 1, which I only have one extruder, notes, and then dependencies. So that's pretty much all of my settings in my Prusa slicer. So there you have it. If you guys have any sort of questions as far as settings go when printing this airframe, please let me know. But I hope this video helps. I know it could be, when you're printing this the first time, it could be a little confusing with the amount of settings. And if you're not comfortable, there's actually a setting here where if you want just simple, it'll only show you the basics of what you need to focus on. And then if you want to customize even more, you go to advanced. And then if you want to see all the settings, you go to expert. Cura has, you have to pull the settings in for Cura, which is why I ended up going with Prusa Slicer. It just lays it out all for you. It's easier to use, but there's not much difference. Majority of the slicers are all pretty good. But anyways, hopefully this helps. And if you guys do have any questions, please comment down below. I do not mind helping anybody out and sharing some feedback that I've had as far as how I've printed before, what has failed before, what would be best to do. But yeah, I'm always open. If you guys like this type of content, please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.